Hi, this is TapCat, and today I want to talk about Civilization 6. Yeah, Firaxis, they dropped a big announcement this past week, so Civ 5 will no longer be the latest and greatest. Starting October 21st, 2016, assuming they stick to that schedule, we will have Civilization 6. Now, the trailer did not have really any information other than the release date, but fortunately, the developers have done some interviews and we've been able to learn more. So let's go through that, some of the highlights at least, and I'll also share my initial reaction to it. So the first thing is that they claim that the content in Civ 6 will actually be comparable to what's currently in Civilization 5 after all the expansions. So they're saying it'll have trade, religion, archaeology, espionage, great works, culture victories, and more. I certainly hope that's true. I don't have any reason to doubt them. And it leaves me somewhat curious as to what the expansions will be, because let's be honest, we know they plan to do expansions. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about how that sounds. So another comment that the designers made is that they wanted to eliminate any repeatable best strategies or blueprints for how to play. For example, certain social policy trees are way more effective than others, except for just like very specific strategies. And so another example of that is the vast majority of people will play where they build 4 cities, or depending again on their strategy, maybe they'll go 5 or something, but you generally just get better results if you do that than if you try to do something else. So they want to stop that. They want you to have to think on your feet and adapt to the specifics of the map and your neighbors. Now, let me just say, I hope that they nail that part, because while I got many, many hours of enjoyment out of Civilization 5, that is ultimately where the game just lost me, is that the more I came to understand it and to understand how to play effectively, then the less interesting it became in a way, because I wasn't making interesting choices. I was just going down this road that was laid out for me. And I don't think that's how they intended it to be, but that's how it was. And thankfully, it took me, quite a lot of hours to reach that point. So by no means am I going to, sit here and just slag on Civ 5 for being too predictable and rote. But if you study the game, if you play the game enough, yeah, you can reach that point. So I really hope that in Civilization 6, they are successful in stopping that and kind of balancing the paths a little bit better in some areas, and in just having enough variability in your circumstances where, yeah, this strategy won't work here, So next up, this is an interesting change. They're talking about the cities no longer occupying a single tile. There are going to be what are called districts, and they've created 12 different types. We don't know all of them at this time, but ones that I've seen mentioned include a science campus, a harbor, military, and industrial. So then what you would do is you would build specific structures. So within the campus, that's where your library or your university would go. And in the military area, they aren't naming buildings, but presumably something like a stable and some of the other things we've seen in the past. And this is all stuff we're going to learn way more coming up to release. And then also, so as I understand it at least, if you don't build the campus, you can't have a library. And you won't, I think, as a practical matter, be able to have all 12 districts for any given city. So this, I think, is where you are going to start seeing some variability because, you have to pick which districts you want for that city. And another thing that will affect that is certain terrain could either be a prerequisite. So, for example, this is obvious. You won't be able to build a harbor if you're not on the water. Duh. But beyond that, you'll get bonuses. Like if you build your science campus on a mountain, you'll get a bonus for that. Whereas, maybe some of these things will be significantly less attractive if you're not positioned to take advantage of those bonuses. So that's, again, where I think you may see some more variability. And so again, my reaction to that is positive based on what we know so far. Another thing they've talked about is to overhaul the leaders a little bit at least. So definitely each leader right now has a personality up to a point. Personally, I think they do a wonderful job in those little introductory cutscenes they do of establishing the leader. But what's really more important is how they play, right? So what they did is they said they wanted to find a way to make each leader unique. So they looked at their roles in history and tried to give each one a trait that only they have. So yeah, there's many leaders that you could just label as, oh, they're aggressive. They attack a lot. And I think that'll still be true as far as it goes, but supposedly you will have a sense that it's more distinct now. That Genghis Khan and Attila, they're not just the same, that kind of thing. So, that's fine. Now, the other thing that they've also said is that because you can learn those historical traits and that could become too predictable, they will also secretly assign at the beginning of each game a different trait. And I think they mean randomly assigned because otherwise you would just learn that too. And that if you spy on that leader, you can learn more and understand their motives better. So in addition to their consistent trait, you would learn this other randomly assigned one as well. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know about that one. Because in their quotes, the developers talk about wanting these guys to seem more predictable in a way, but then they don't want them to be predictable. And I just wonder if this isn't going to undercut the whole idea of like, hey, Gandhi seems like Gandhi. And that if you randomly assign something, what if that thing goes in a very different direction from his basic trait, his consistent one? So that one I'm a little more concerned about than some of the others. Honestly, I personally don't mind that part being more predictable. Like if you know that Attila, is a certain way, or like in Civ 5, the way Hiawatha is such a backstabber, and he talks about honor and then he betrays you. I'm okay if that's just how he is all the time, personally. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see what they do with it. Now, another thing that's also going to change is science and research. So what they didn't like is that you can research anything. And so the example they give most often is that, let's say you have a landlocked civilization. You can research all of the stuff about sailing and stuff like that just as fast as somebody whose all their cities are on the water. And so what they did is they've switched it up so that now, like if you're on the water and you're building fishing boats and stuff like that, that's going to speed up your research on these kind of seafaring technologies. And I believe you'll see there will be many instances of that, in other categories as well. So that's interesting. And the only concern I have about that is just because tech is a tree, and how they like one thing is a prerequisite for the next. I mean, when you go far enough down the tech tree into the modern era, if you tell me, oh, you can't research anything here because you're not on the ocean, that would just completely lock me out of a whole path. I'm going to give them credit enough to assume that they're not retards, pardon the expression, and that they've actually will have played the game through to its conclusion multiple times and realized that would be a problem. So as long as they can deal with the tech tree part of that, I think that's a cool idea, that the things you do a lot, you would get better at. That makes a lot of sense, and I'm cool with the concept. I just hope they stick the landing. So then the other thing that they talked about is related to war and diplomacy and stuff, and I thought this was interesting. It's that early in the game, fighting other civilizations and maybe even city-states, that part's less clear to me, but that war will kind of be the norm. That is the normal state of things. But then as you move forward through time, it becomes more of a formal thing, and you have to declare war and you establish embassies with each other and stuff like that. So I actually like that a lot, and I hope that part of what comes with that is that attacking somebody very early in the game doesn't carry the same level of diplomatic penalty, literally 1,500 years later in game time that it does now. Because that is kind of a stretch, you know what I mean? Like, you attack somebody in like 500 BC, and in 2000 AD, they're still pissed off about it. I mean, man. So then another thing, as far as how war is actually waged, it's still going to be very limited as far as your ability to stack units. They're not going to go back to unlimited stacking the way they used to prior to Civ 5. But what they're going to do is say certain units can combine. So for example, instead of having to move a settler and a warrior, and they're both going to the same place and you want to move them together, but you had to take that time of, oh, okay, now I move this guy. Okay, now I move that guy. You can link them and they'll just move together. So that to me is a nice quality of life thing. But beyond that, you can also have military units that complement each other, such as infantry and an anti-tank gun. Okay, infantry being very vulnerable to tanks. Now they have this support unit that they can travel with, and you can link those two together. Now, I don't believe that just any two can be linked, but some at least you'll be able to. The other thing that you'll also be able to do is if you had two of the same thing, like let's just say two riflemen, then you could link those two together on the same tile, and it won't be double the strength of a single one, but it will be significantly more, like 40%, say. So now you have to make that choice of, hey, I'm not getting full value, but at the same time, if your opponent has them linked like that, if those two units clash, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you if you've got the single one. So I think that what I like is that it opens up more strategic thinking, right? You have to make a choice. And maybe it won't be an interesting one. Maybe it'll just become a thing where it's like, okay, I have to do this. We'll see. Now, what I haven't touched on yet is the art style. And this is apparently very divisive. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a separate video on that because I want to go into a little bit more detail. And this episode's already getting a little long for my taste. But I'm going to do that very soon. So overall, I like what I'm hearing about the game. I definitely plan to buy it. I definitely plan to cover it extensively. In fact, I think as they release more information, I'm going to do more videos. I'm going to cover this game pretty extensively before it even comes out. So if you enjoyed this video at all, then you have something to look forward to. And if not, well, you can skip them. Okay. I don't think I have anything new to add right now, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thanks for watching. I hope we see you next time.